So in this video, I'm going to share with you the system I use to get into the best shape of my life at the age of 47 and to add about 15 years to my expected lifespan according to the science. So make sure you watch the end of this video so you get everything that I've learned, all of my secrets in my whole training program I use for longevity. First, a little high-level background on me. So first and foremost, I'm a dad. I've got 3 kids, and they're my first priority. When I think about fitness, I do look back at a time in my life when I was in college playing rugby, and I actually was in shape because I had a purpose. I needed to be the best teammate I could be. We were trying to win games. It made my fitness a priority. 25 years later, I'm a dad, and I'm a technology dude, and I'm 47 years old. Now, some of you already might know me as the inventor and CEO of Rocketbook. You might have seen me get laughed off of Shark Tank. Now, I managed to turn that product into a wild success, but damn was it stressful along the way. And through the years, I always did some sort of fitness. I mean, I always had a feeling that I should look better and feel better and be healthy, but that was kind of a vague purpose. So of course, when responsibilities like family and work came up, well, my exercise regimen had to fall by the wayside at times. And if I'm really being honest, it wasn't just time. Sometimes I just didn't have the motivation, and my habit of drinking most nights to cope with stress really was crowding out my fitness. And I was dedicated to my family, and I loved the business that I was building. But honestly, I was just disappointed in myself for letting my body go. There was this one time I walked a lot and I got really lean, but I lost a lot of muscle. And there was this other time I took on a lifting program and I gained a lot of muscle, but after just a couple months, I started walking funny and had a lot of pain, so I had to stop. Now, I've done Peloton, Orange Theory, P90X, Insanity, you name it. I've done yoga, I've even tried Pilates. But here's the problem with all of these. They're all just exercise programs. I miss the days of training for a purpose. And then I finally sold my company. I had some time and money on my hands. I actually thought about going to Panama to get stem cell therapy. I felt like a warrior who'd come back from an epic battle. My body was just a disaster. But then I came across Peter Attia, the famous longevity doctor, and he's super legit. Here's what I learned from Peter. Instead of sending all of his patients to stem cell therapies or blood boys or weird, expensive treatments, he really just commands to them to get very fit.
So if we were to stack up every possible known risk factor that are most significantly associated with longevity, smoking, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, end-stage kidney disease, how much of a hazard ratio do these bring to you in terms of all-cause mortality? They're quite big. Type 2 diabetes is about a 30% increase in mortality. Smoking is 50% increase. Being weak relative to being strong is about 250%. Having a very low VO2 max is about 400%.
So this made me realize that longevity, first and foremost, is a sport. But unlike training for a football game or to win the Olympics, I want to train to be a badass grandpa. When I get older, I want to be able to get on the floor with my grandkids and wrestle. I want to have a bunch of friends and go out and meet with them. And I want to be dancing at my grandkids' wedding. Hired my own team of physiologists and coaches and doctors to help me understand how to structure this as an achievement-based system, and so that I could put a training system in place to know, am I on track? Am I winning at the sport of longevity? This was really just a little over 6 months of training. Not only did my body composition change and my strength numbers change, but my VO2 max number, remember that's the number that science has that is most associated with how long you'll live, brought me from an expected lifespan, 81.8 years, to 96.3. So almost 15 years just on the VO2 max effects alone, right? The science is very clear that these capacities, they are athletic capacities and they matter to longevity. Everyone heard the phrase, use it or lose it. You're never going to hear me say that. That's like a maintenance mentality. We have plenty of anabolic ability, meaning to build our fortress higher. Think of your body as the physical fortress to protect against the waves of aging that will come. Now is the time not to just maintain that fortress. Now is the time to build that fortress higher, to look at the capacities that we can build higher. VO2 max, strength, mobility, your body composition, the power that you have, the balance that you have to be able to protect yourself when you're an older age. And there's plenty we can do using fitness to protect our brain as well. What is VO2 max? VO2 max is basically your aerobic capacity. It's the highest rate of oxygen that your body can consume when it's being active, right, to generate energy. It's measured in milliliters of oxygen per second divided by body weight in kilogram, and that becomes important. VO2 max is a big predictor of how long you live. It's also the determinant of how well you live. The top line, the green line, are higher fitness individuals. The red line at the bottom, lower fitness in VO2 max, and the middle are average fitness. And you'll see that as your VO2 max declines, you lose living capacity. Once you get, below your high 50s, you lose the ability to run at 10 miles an hour. And once you're below your mid 30s, you can't run at 6 miles an hour. Once you're below your mid 20s, you can't walk 3 miles an hour up a steep hill. Unfortunately, we don't really have the data going past 75 years, but you can see where this goes. But the great thing is that you can train it. You'll see a lot of the people in the podcast sphere talk about polarized training, which is a mix of a lot of zone 2 at a pace that is where you can talk, but it's kind of hard to hold a conversation. And then combine that with one all-out sprint, usually a Norwegian 4x4. These are vomit-inducing type of sprints. I did polarized training for quite a while. I got nice gains for it, but I discovered another protocol that I think is appropriate for most people, and I'm going to continue to use, and it's more accessible and really will get you more reliably up to elite levels of VO2 max. We call this cardio for life protocol. A steady state, all done on an incline treadmill. There's no sprinting required. You're mostly in zone 2, pushing on your lactate threshold a bit to go into zone 3. It's a 40-minute workout, and it's 3 sessions a week. And really what you need is a treadmill, a heart rate monitor. You need a system that applies progressive overload in cardio. So you're not going to see that typically from a Peloton, Orange Theory, things like that, where you just kind of show up and try your hardest. Progressive overload is pretty scientific, and it's very precise. It's something that you see all the time in a weightlifting program, but for some reason, it's rare in cardio programs. In Cardio for Life, the principles here are to find your heart rate stretch point. It gets you right at your lactate threshold, knocking on the door and a little bit past it toward the end. And then you see your cardio adapt. Your heart rate drops in your following workouts at that stimulus. And when you do, congratulate yourself because your cardio system just got stronger. And then you add 0.1 miles per hour to bring it right back up to that stretch point. And you climb up the ranks of cardiovascular fitness in a very predictable and systematic way. You can go test your VO2 max. I do this a few times a year. It costs about $150. You just go to Google and you say, find me a VO2 max testing place near me. It takes about 15 minutes. They start you walking on a treadmill, and every minute they make it faster. And then the last 3 minutes are like really hard until you just have to stop. And this mask that they put on your face measures the oxygen that is coming out in your exhales and coming in on your inhales. And it just figures out what's the most amount of oxygen that you consumed. And they divide it by kilograms of your body weight to give you your VO2 max score. If you never want to do a VO2 max test, or you just want to keep track of and see progress on your cardio, is to use a wearable. I use an Apple Watch, but all of them sort of track your resting heart rate. And what you can expect to see in a proper system that does progressive overload for cardio that is making your heart stronger, you should expect to see your resting heart rate drop over time. And that's super important. It's also very correlated with longevity. Any resting heart rate above 45 is linearly correlated with mortality. So if you got something above 45, you want to get that lower. And take Dennis, for example. He used Cardio for Life to get his VO2 max up to 60, which is off the charts for his age. He was 58, and he got his resting heart rate down to 40. And he actually went in for a medical procedure. The nurses almost like called over a crash cart. And the doctor said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, his heart rate is 40 beats per minute." And he goes, "Oh no, he's not having a heart event. He's actually just super healthy." All right, next let's talk about strength. There's a ton of data that shows that the weaker your grips, the more likely you are to die. And why is there so much data about hand grip? It's the reason why is because it's super easy to measure. It's kind of hard to have a bunch of older people do deadlifts and squats. It's going to be an expensive study and people are going to get hurt. But instead, what they get is a hand dynamometer and it reads out how strong they are. Hand grip is really just a proxy for greater overall strength. And overall strength is really, truly what matters. It does stand to reason. That said, they have done some other studies, some really interesting, this one in Spain. And what they found was for men, the biggest, the one that was most associated with mortality rates was the grip strength of all of these four. So that was really interesting. Um, but what was really interesting for women, how deadly having weak legs is. So this, they said weak knees, but it's really the leg extension. It's your quadricep. The women in the lower quartile had a mortality rate that was over 500% higher than the women with strong legs. Absolutely startling. So this kind of, for women, uh, leapfrogs the VO2 max. For women, if you look at this data, their number one thing that they need to look at is strength, and their number two is VO2 max. For men, it's flipped. Our number one is VO2 max. Our number two is strength. So, any good strength program, right? You're going to have progressive overload rule the day. Um, we, especially if athletes haven't been doing any lifting in a while, we're going to start you light, regress hard moves. So that means if you can't do a pull up, we're not going to throw you on a pull up bar. We're going to do things that are easier. And using progressive overload, before you know it, you're going to be able to do a pull up. And mobility first, because the rule number one in longevity athletics is don't get injured. The type of workouts that you should be doing, there are different styles of workouts. We're going to put on some muscle with a style of training that is built to put on some muscle. That you just fancy word hypertrophy, which is the opposite of atrophy, right? And then another style of training which is more strength based. So taking that meat that we put on those bones and making it more efficient to apply more force. And then power is really force times speed. So getting some plyometrics into the training as well once our tissues are ready for it. And everything applying progressive overload. Every workout is tracked. You know what you're doing this week and why, how it relates to last week, and you should be hitting personal records on each workout. The type of workouts that we're doing, typically 45 minutes to an hour, you can pack into the gym, 2 to 4 sessions a week, and you're going to march up the standards ladder. When I first started training this whole longevity thing, my mobility was a complete mess. I had huge foot surgeries and shoulder surgeries in my past. I've torn ligaments in my knees. My back was always injured and always going out, and some muscle pulls in my groin. So I was a complete catastrophe. And this bode very poorly. Remember that VO2 max graph that I showed you earlier? Keep in mind that this is for the population and it's not for an individual. What you see for a person is that they might actually start off with a pretty good VO2 max. They're going along pretty well, but then, boom, they hurt their Achilles tendon playing tennis, right? And things start to go downhill, and then boom, their back gives out, so they stop gardening and things like that. And then these orthopedic problems tend to actually stop them in their tracks and stop them from being active and keep their VO2 max. We need to train mobility first to fortify our joints and our connective tissues to prevent us from having problems that are going to set us back. Now, I wasn't joking when I was saying I was a mess. By my late 20s, my feet Knees, back, shoulders were a complete catastrophe. I went to physical therapists to try to get better. They would kind of get me barely functional. And I did a lot of yoga too, but it just didn't check all the boxes. Really, when you think about mobility and where people drop the ball, is they think of it maybe in terms of range of motion, but it's really your ability to generate force in extended and compromised ranges. So now at 47, I can move like my 27-year-old self could only dream of, and I'm just not susceptible to injury. I'm not going to hurt my back by bending over wrong to pick something up. All right, let's talk about body composition. Super important subject for longevity. Won't belabor it. Everyone wants to get their body fat percentage down. If you're like 99% of the population, it's important to prevent all the four horsemen of mortality. But what we don't talk enough about is your lean mass index. You need to know this. You need to track it. Basically, after the age of 40 and 50 in an accelerating way, sarcopenia happens. And that's just a word that means that you lose muscle as you get older. So the essence here is to lift weights, get on the right diet, get the right amount of protein, and get that lean mass index up. So the first four are your big pillars. Your training sessions are going to revolve around pushing these capacities higher. And in your warm-ups and in between sets, we're going to weave in stimulus to push forward your power, your balance, and neuroplasticity. And it really doesn't take a lot of training time for this type of stimulus to totally change how you feel in your body and move like a kid again. Hey, so all this worked great for me. I know it'll work for you. It makes training a lot more meaningful and fun. If you just need a little bit of help, I'm here to help. Feel free to book a strategy call with me for 20 minutes. We can talk about, where you are now, how to put together a program for you, how to set goals, how to speed you up on the process, and creating a longevity athlete system of training for you.